Well, thank you.
Good. Did you have a good vacation last week?
Yes, I did. Thank you.
Good. We'll give Candy a minute.
Sounds good.
Did they load everything for dress rehearsal, the dress rehearsal last night?
I am not sure. We actually had an icy day in Edmonton today, so I am working from home just because I didn't want to run into any trouble or delays on the roads.
Oh yeah, I don't blame you. Not to mention, we don't want another accident where somebody breaks their teeth.
Yeah, absolutely, that too.
How's Vanita feeling?
I think she's completed the process, so I think she's pretty excited that she's back to normal.
Oh, good. That was horrible.
Yeah.
All right, it looks like the gang is all here, Laura.
Awesome. I don't think I've met anyone. This is my first meeting, so hello.
Hello.
Awesome. So today we are here to talk about the accounts payable functionality in Dynamics. So I am going to review that today, and feel free to stop me at any point if you want to focus in on anything that we're chatting about. Otherwise, I'll just kind of keep going. But again, please feel free to ask any questions along the way.
Perfect.
So I am going to share my screen. I think Stuart has started the recording, so this information will all be available to you afterward. I'm going to share my screen, which I think I just shared the wrong screen. So 1 second, we're going to try that one more time. That looks better. Okay, so this is kind of our agenda for today, and I will send out this kind of outline afterward, so you'll have it. I will try and stay away from focusing too much on the PowerPoint, though. I'd like most of our time together today to be on Dynamics and demonstrating some functionality in there. We'll refer back to this occasionally, but what I'm hoping is that after this session, you can use this as a guide to I'm going to follow it in order, and you can use it as a guide to figure out, what I talked about, and when I might have talked about it for the purpose of, going through the recording again after if you needed to. But we're going to spend most of our time in Dynamics and not so much on the PowerPoint, because I'm hopeful that the Dynamics side might be more meaningful to us as we go through our learning today. But we're going to talk about kind of the accounts payable setup, which is called purchases and payables setup in Dynamics. We're going to look at vendors and all of the fields that are set up against vendors. We're going to look at vendor ledger entries, which is anything that gets posted against a vendor or the subledger for accounts payable. We'll talk about purchase invoices and how to create them, both manually and through Excel. An upload feature where you can kind of create multiple at once. We can talk about features like copying documents, correcting documents, how we create credit memos, what the corporate bank account looks like, and then how to make payments and some reports. So that's kind of our agenda for today. We're going to talk about the purchase and payable setup first, and that is kind of the accounts payable setup and configurations in Dynamics. So I'm just going to move our PowerPoint out of the way here for now, and we're going to look at Dynamics. And I think that Dan has led you through at some point an intro to Dynamics. So hopefully this isn't the first time you've seen this screen. But what I wanted to mention is there's two kind of ways to look at what's called your role center. And right now I'm logged in as an accountant because we're going to go through some accounting features today. And the screen I was previously on has some like headers at the top, but otherwise it's kind of open for us to be able to customize what is important for your team to be able to see. So it's kind of open for us, and we're able to do some customization on this screen to kind of put some quick links or information that might be relevant to the different roles that you're going to have in Dynamics. And some of the ways you can navigate in Dynamics are by clicking on the hyperlinks at the top here. So this one is like a drop down and includes multiple functions below this drop down. Or you can search using the magnifying glass on the top right. So you'll probably see me doing that a little bit. But when we're doing searching here, we often, most often need to know the name of the function that we're searching for. So what I wanted to highlight is that as you're new to the system and starting to play around a little bit, if you're not exactly sure the name of the function that you're looking for, something else that we've done is allowed you to kind of click on this button here, like this kind of hamburger menu, the three horizontal lines, which says you can explore some of the business features for your role in Business Central. So when I click on that, what I'm brought to is a list of a lot of the functions that typically an accountant might want to see. So I just wanted to highlight that as well. As you're kind of navigating through and learning and you're not exactly sure the words you need to type when you're going to search for something, this is another way that you can do that. But what I mentioned was the first thing that we're going to do is look at the accounts payable setup. And I don't think I have a quick link from that in here, so we're going to search for it. And that's because I don't really think you're ever really going to need to use it. Other than maybe the first time we do configuration of the system, you most likely will never need to use it again. So it's not a quick link right now on this page. So we could add it if you wished later. So what I'm going to look for is the purchases and payable setup. And because I don't want to type the whole word, I just use some kind of short form of what I'm looking for, and it still kind of figures out what I am looking for. So the purchase and payable setup is what it brought to me as an option based on the text I entered here. So I'm going to click it. And I will widen the screen here so that we can see a little bit more. And what this is the configurations for accounts payable that have been set up. And as I mentioned, I expect we'll only need to do this one time for each of your Business Central companies, and then more than likely, you probably will never need to access it again. But what it shows is our basic configurations and our preferences for how accounts payable should work. So, for example, there is an option here, a toggle that says allow tax difference, and it specifies whether a user is able or permitted to create manual adjustments for tax. So, for example, if we received an invoice from a vendor, and as we're entering that invoice, we noticed that tax was off, a penny or two based on how their accounting system rounded it and based on how our accounting system rounded it. This setting being set to true. So when the toggle's over on the right-hand side and it's green here, it's saying, do we want to allow tax differences to be edited or to be permitted? This means yes, we do. If we turned it off, that would be the off setting, which would mean no, we do not. But in this case, when it's on, a user who has the permissions to enter invoices in Dynamics or Business Central, does have the ability to edit the tax on a line basis if needed. So these are just different configurations that relate to accounts payable. One that is important for us and that we will discuss as we go through the setup of your organization is vendor posting groups. So I'm going to click on that here. And right now, this template company, our testing environment, is based off of a Canadian client. So we named our vendor posting group Canadian vendors. Obviously, we will use a different naming convention for your vendors. But what this is the posting group or configuration that's linking the GL account that we are going to that we are prescribing should be the credit side of all of our accounts payable entries. So this is a GL account number here that we are configuring and saying, okay, when we're entering accounts payable invoices, this is the other side of the entry, the GL account to which the other side of the entry should be going to. Similarly, we have a separate account for discounts associated with those invoices. In this particular client, they have a separate GL account where they want discounts for credits to go. So as we go through the setup from an accounting perspective, we will be going through many different posting groups. And these posting groups will be basically the link or the rule that prescribes for this type of activity or accounting entry that's performed in the system, how does this entry relate to GL accounts? So that's what posting groups are, and specifically the vendor posting group is found on this purchase and payable setup page as a link. We can also search for it too using the magnifying glass here, but that's one of the important things that we will definitely be talking about as we go through your accounts payable setup. There's some configurations here regarding number series, and these number series setups will tell us the rules for things like vendor numbers. So if we go and kind of look at these rules for vendor numbers, it brings us kind of our number series rules here. And we, in this company, have said that vendors and the vendor code for vendors are allowed to be manually set up. So we have this like manual numbers checkbox here, which is in gray. And right now it's checked. It might be a little bit hard to see, but it is checked, which means currently in this setup for this company, we allow vendor codes to be manually prescribed by the user. So rather than having an example like this, where all vendors start with a V and their number increments by 1, which is another process we could follow. Instead, for vendors, we allow manual numbers to be set up so that maybe the code can be a little bit more meaningful to users. It has some sort of, alpha characters in there that are similar to what our actual name of our vendor is, so that it's easier for team members to search for the vendor that they're looking to transact against. And there's lots of number series for all the different types of transactions we can complete in the Business Central system. But I'm just going to back out of here. The ones that are in this page, this purchase and payable setup page, specifically relate to accounts payable. So we have invoices, posted invoices, credits, posted credits, and I think there's a few more if I were to kind of expand here. It's possible that we won't need to transact with all of these types of transactions for accounts payable, but there are many available to us, which is kind of why there's some many number series set up, but we have already sort of configured those in the system. So we would just go through your settings and make sure kind of you're happy with the configurations that have been set, or make whatever tweaks that are necessary. So this is our kind of setup page for accounts payable that we'll go through when we configure your companies for the accounts payable process. As we're walking through that process, making sure that all of these configurations are what you want to see. So this is accounts payable setup. The next thing that I think I would like to talk about is vendors and talk about what vendors look like in Business Central. So I do have a quick link on the accountant role for vendors here. So I'm going to click that now. And we have a number of vendors set up in this company, just for the purposes of kind of us looking at some. So maybe I'll click on one that's not a numbered company. We'll click on this one down here, AAA Doors. And this is what's called a vendor card. And it will house all of the information that Dynamics needs to be able to transact against that vendor. On the right-hand side here, this screen layout is found on multiple screens in Dynamics, and it's called a fact box. And you have the ability to expand and collapse this fact box just to be able to kind of view more of the left-hand side of the screen. So I can do that by clicking the I or information button on the top right here. And when I click it, it'll collapse that fact box pane. Or when I click it again, it will kind of bring it forward. And what it shows is just some basic information about that vendor, some statistics about that vendor, the total that's outstanding to that vendor, the total orders that we have to that vendor, outstanding orders. You also have the ability to upload attachments here. So if there's any attachments that are files that you want to link to this vendor card that would be important for different people to be able to access, you have the ability to do that here. You can also make some kind of notes to save about the vendor here too. So we'll collapse that now because there's not too much to that other than what we just reviewed. So these sections that are bolded and have lines underneath them is just a way that Microsoft has kind of designed the screen to create some natural groupings of information. And they're called fast tabs. So this is the general fast tab. I have the ability to expand and contract it by clicking the word general at the top, or this bolded heading of general at the top, which would collapse it, or expand it if I clicked it again. So what it's showing is I have a vendor card here, and this is demonstrating what we reviewed just a few moments ago regarding the number series setup for vendors, that it allows us to prescribe our own vendor codes, because you can see that for this one, they've used a code that's very similar to the vendor name just to facilitate easy searching in the system. The name here would represent the legal entity name of the vendor, but there is another field here too, name two, to represent, the doing business as name of the vendor if the two happen to be different. Here we have a lot of companies that are registered as numbered companies, and that number is actually their legal entity name and the name that we need to make payments or write checks to, but they could also be known in the industry as a different name, more meaningful and recognizable name, and we would put that here. Blocked is a field you can use if you ever want to halt or prevent transactions from happening against that vendor for whatever reason. You can block payments, or you can block everything, which would include the creation of new purchase orders, the creation of new invoices, the creation of new credits. It basically prevents any future transactions from occurring against that vendor. When nothing is selected, as it is right now, this is a blank field. That means that this vendor is open to be transacted with. It has no limitations set up against it. In this address and contact fast tab, it has kind of exactly that type of information in it. So address, information, and I'll also mention that, again, as I mentioned earlier, this example company or template company is for a Canadian client, but we can change the language pack to be United States language pack, which would rename some of these things, which province would probably change to state or things like that. So I just thought I'd mention that now that we have the ability to do that as well. It just changes the label here to make it a little bit more meaningful. So I just thought I'd mention that while I was here. But yeah, this is just all of the address information for that vendor. When I scroll down to the invoicing FAST tab, and I'm going to expand it, this is probably, again, another example of where this field would likely relabel for the when we change the language pack, but this is our tax identification number in Canada called GST. So that's what that is. Tax liable. My recommendation is that we turn this on for every vendor for which tax might ever apply. If we have it off, what happens is any purchase orders or invoices or credits created for that vendor will default to be exempt. They will have no tax. So it is probably most likely in our best interest to turn this on for every vendor. And then in the cases where that vendor might have line items that do not have tax applicable to them, we have the ability to configure those line items to be tax exempt. But in the case where a vendor typically has tax applied, we want to turn this on, even if sometimes on occasion they might have line items that are exempt from tax. We can handle that at a line item level, but it's my recommendation that we toggle this on for all vendors who might have tax applied. Tax area code. So right now, again, this is a Canadian client, so I only have the Canadian taxes configured, but this is where we would prescribe all of the rules for the different tax that's applicable, and we would set them up against each vendor. Pay to vendor number, it should be left blank unless we happen to be required to remit the invoices for this vendor to another vendor that's set up in the system. So sometimes that could occur if, like, this is a local branch of a larger vendor organization, and we want to transact against this local branch and have their address listed on POs with this address, but maybe we've been given direction by this vendor that all of their payments should go to their corporate head office, which is somewhere else. Then we have the ability to change the vendor to whom payments are made. But otherwise, if that's not applicable, best practice is to leave this blank for all of our vendors. And then this vendor will be the one that's paid. Here's another section, another example of posting groups. So this is where that posting group that we saw earlier on the purchases and payable setup screen, this is where we actually use it. And we say that when we transact with this vendor, the posting group shall be the posting group we looked at earlier, which means transactions that are entered for this vendor. We'll go to the GL account. The credit side of the entry will go to the GL account that's set up in that posting group. So without posting groups being populated, we are not able to transact with that vendor. So those will be some of the kind of initial configurations that we will go through to set up your company to be available for use in the test environment, is to figure out, okay, what's the chart of accounts? And then next, what are the posting group rules that we need to set up in order to be able to allow you to go through and start testing in the system? So those will be some of the configurations that we'll begin with when we're setting up your environment, and this is where they're actually used on the vendor card. I'm going to move on to the payments FAST tab here, so I'm going to expand it. And here is where we set up payment terms. So what I'm going to do actually, I think, is just give you an example. I'm not sure, I don't know a lot about your business processes yet, so I don't know about how your payment terms are, but what I'm going to do is just kind of bring you an example of how the payment terms are set up in this company. And we will obviously kind of review and tailor these to your needs when we set up your environment. But we have a bunch of payment terms that are set up in this company, and payment terms determines or is used to calculate the due date of invoices. And due date in Dynamics is calculated based on document date of the document. So, for example, in the case of an invoice will have a document date, which when that invoice is generated from Buildbase, that's either the date that the vendor submitted the invoice, if vendors are submitting invoices in your environment, or if they're not, and invoices are generated through the approval of construction tasks in a schedule, the document date is determined by the date that the schedule is advanced, or the date that the scheduled task is completed. So based on that document date, the system needs rules to determine when the due date of that invoice is. So this first payment term of due now means that the due date is equal to the submitted date or equal to the document date. So the moment we enter that invoice, it's due immediately for our next payment run. We also have payment terms of which are called kind of EOMF, which stands for end of month following. And right now in this company, the rules are such that if the document date of the invoice or the completion of the construction task is anywhere for the 1st to the 15th of the month, or the 16th to the last day of the month, the due date of that invoice is the last day of the following month. So end of month following. So regardless of the submission date of that invoice or the approval date of that task in month A, or month one, I should say, the due date of the invoice will be the last day of month 2. So that's what end of month following means. And then we have kind of N15, N30, N45, N60, which all follow the same sort of calculation. And they stand for like net 15 days, 30 days, 45 days, 60 days. And so what they're saying, or what they mean, is if either of those, either the vendor submission date or the approval of the task occur from the 1st to the 15th of month 1, the invoice is due on the last day of month 1. If the invoice is submitted in the last part of month 1, then the invoice is due on the 15th of month 2. So this is an example of payment terms that are common here in Canada, but obviously your payment terms might be different. So that'll be also something that we review when we're looking at your business processes to figure out, okay, well, how do the payment term rules need to be in your company so that we can make sure that vendors are paid on time and when they expect. So that's what payment terms are, and we can configure those as we need to make it work for your business process. And there's something else called payment method code. And what payment method code is a way to group invoices together or vendor ledger entries together that we want to kind of pay in a similar manner. So for example, this particular vendor we have as a payment method code of EFT, or electronic funds transfer, which means we intend to pay this vendor by electronic funds transfer. And when we go through and prepare our payments and we search through the system to prepare our kind of payment file, this payment method code gives us a way to search through our vendor ledger entries and pull out the ones that we want to pay at the same time. So for this, in this case, we'll say, okay, system, grab me all of the vendor ledger entries that exist and that should be paid by EFT or electronic funds transfer, and by a certain date, because this is the payment date that I'm going to transact against. So it's a way of kind of grouping them all together. We have some other ones like manual. So for example, maybe you have some credit card payments that need to be posted, and you would pay those not by electronic funds transfer and not by check, but like through the credit card portal through your corporate bank. But you still need to reflect those transactions in the system, obviously. Then you might use like a different payment method code of manual or credit card, so that when you're going through all of your credit card payments after you've made the payment in the bank and you need to reflect and post those similar entries in Business Central, you would say, okay, find for me all the invoices I entered that were type credit card, and group them all together because these are the ones I want to transact with right now. So this is a way of grouping similar transactions together, and it is recommended that we set one up on every vendor in order to be able to kind of filter through our vendor ledger entries and grab the ones we want at any given time. And this will make more sense as we kind of go through and you start to perform testing, but I did want to kind of introduce the concept a little bit. Preferred bank account code. Now, I don't know if I'm going to go to the fast hat or the kind of ribbon at the top here, and I'm going to hit the navigate button, and I'm just going to check if this vendor has a bank account. So I'm going to click on the bank accounts link, and they do. I can see one here called Bank One, and we'll look at that in a moment, but I wanted to first check if it existed. And because it does, what we want to do is to select the preferred bank account code here and populate it on the vendor card. So that's what I'm going to do. And that means that when I transact against this vendor and I indicate that that transaction should be paid by electronic funds transfer, then this will be by default the bank account that appears. So I won't have to manually select it because we've indicated it's the preferred bank account code we want to use. We know this is the active bank account for the vendor at this time. This is the one that'll automatically be attached to pay out to the vendor for any transaction. So we want to populate that here. We don't need to worry about too much else in this FastHub other than check date format. Dynamics does require us to tell it how it wants us to format the date on any checks we print. So this is a mandatory field. It's populated there. I think maybe even for the US, you might do it differently, but for Canada, this is the common check date format. In receiving, I don't think there's too much that's relevant, so that's good. We don't need to pay much attention to that right now. UDF fields, we don't have any UDF fields set up on the vendor, but if you have any that are important to you, that are fields that are not already existing on the vendor card out of the box, this is the selection where you could put in a field of your own. It stands for user-defined fields, which now when I look at it, it doesn't really make an incredible amount of sense that we have an F here and fields here, but anyway, moving right along, that's what that is. So if you had any fields that we don't review that are important to your business process, this is the section where we could add it. We've added some vendor details here that are relevant in Canada. We track insurance and like safety, WCB information like workers' compensation. So this is an area where our clients can do that here, where they can track the numbers and the expiry dates of those registrations that the vendor has.
I have a question.
Oh, yes.
The expiry dates, is this something that has also like a control that if the vendor insurance expired, would that pause the payment or any transactions related to that vendor?
Great question. The answer is not at this time. So it's simply for tracking right now. It does not prevent or flag the expiry. We do have reports that people use on a, maybe we would say like monthly or quarterly basis where they would review any upcoming expiries so that they can make sure that they reach out to the vendors and get the updated information. But at this time, there is no preventative mechanism which prevents transactions from being posted or paid if these, if
Yeah,
the
that
dates are expired.
you know, I'm not okay with that. That's an important functionality that that we need.
Okay, that'll just have to be noted and shared kind of with Stuart and Dan, to be discussed at a later time.
Okay.
I'll just kind of give you the facts now, and we can take any kind of important takeaways, which of this is obviously one to be kind of discussed later.
Sure. Got it.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. The other functionality we've built in, now this is for Canada T5018, but I think Dynamics already has it in there for US. Your 1099 codes are here. We will need to test the corresponding reports in Dynamics for all of the 1099 information that you might require to make sure that meets the standard for you. But I have not done that yet because I've only been familiar with the Canadian side, so I'm not sure of the IRS regulations for 1099, but I'm excited to learn about that as we move forward. So that's kind of, I think, everything on the actual vendor card that I wanted to review that are in these fast tabs. The other important pieces of data that we'll need to enter are in this navigate button at the top. And there's these first three buttons are the ones that I want to highlight. So contact is where we will enter email addresses for the vendor, where and this screen will link Dynamics to their corresponding Buildbase account. So for any vendors that we want to have access to our Buildbase portal to review purchase orders or to submit invoices or to review schedules against jobs, we do that in the contact button, and we would create a new contact for every vendor individual that we want to be able to access information about that vendor in Buildbase. You can see there's two set up right now. So that means that both of these individuals, when they log into Buildbase with these respective email addresses, they will be able to see information about this vendor. If we do not do this, even if these individuals have logins for Buildbase, they will, when they log in, they'll see nothing. They won't be able to see purchase orders. It'll just be a blank screen. And that's because we haven't linked their Buildbase user to the Dynamics vendor that they should have access to. So this is a required step in order to allow them to see the information that they need in Buildbase. So that's what we use this contacts button for on the navigate button of the vendor card. We also have bank accounts, which we just glossed over briefly a few moments ago. And this will give us a list of all the bank accounts that have ever existed for a vendor. And based on your business process, you can decide if you want to keep historical ones or if you just delete old ones and create new ones when the vendor informs you that they've changed bank accounts. It's totally up to you. When I click on this bank account here, I'm going to review the required fields for a bank account. We have a few more fields populated here than are actually needed in this example. We don't actually need address, city, province, or state, zip code for bank accounts. This is supposed to represent the vendor's bank account address, vendor's bank's address, not the vendor's actual physical address. It's their bank address, and that's not actually required for the system to operate. You're more than welcome to enter the data for sure if you have it, but in our in my experience, many times we don't, and the only information we have is their actual bank account numbers, and that's okay. So the only information that's actually required are code and a name to kind of indicate, or just code actually to indicate what the bank code is. Country or region code is required. Their bank information, like their account number, transit, branch number, is also required. And then this use for electronic payments toggle needs to be turned on in order for the system to be allowed to use this information for electronic payments. But otherwise, like, we don't actually have to have the address in here at all. It's not required for the system to operate. So if you don't have it, if the vendor doesn't provide it and they just give you the actual numbers, there's no problem with that, for sure. So I just thought I would kind of mention that. That's what this is for. And we obviously need this information in order to be able to process electronic funds transfers for a vendor. So this is how we would set up a vendor bank account. And along those same lines, the other configuration I wanted to show you is document layouts. And what we use document layouts for is the email address for which we want to send the vendor remittance advice. So I'm going to click on it now. And when we're processing an electronic payment to the vendor using the bank account we just looked at, the system wants to know, okay, if you're going to process them an electronic payment, what is the email address on the vendor side who should receive the electronic remittance advice telling them how much we're paying them, when we're paying them, and what invoices we're paying them for. And this is what the purpose of that screen is, to tell the system that for a vendor remittance, when we process a vendor remittance, this is the email address to which we want to send it. The other piece of information present in here is the report ID. So report ID is a way for us to tell the system, this is the layout of what we want the remittance advice to look like. And all of those are called reports. And so we have to tell the system, okay, when you're creating a vendor remittance, this is the report ID you should use, i.e. this is what the vendor remittance the vendor should receive should look like, and this is the email address that you need to send it to. So that's the purpose of this screen, and it's called document layouts, which is sort of a ambiguous term. You might wonder, well, why wouldn't they have called it something that really tells me it's for remittance advice? And that's because you can also set up different types of communications to vendors for different things in Dynamics. Purchase orders we don't do within Dynamics because all of that communication comes right out of Buildbase, and we don't really do posted return shipments either. So it's called document layouts, which is a little bit of a funny name, but that's because it's not only used for vendor remittances. We are just only using it for vendor remittances at this time. So those are the most important aspects or fields on a vendor card. So the takeaway that we have so far that we've discussed is to talk about insurance or workers' compensation and figure out, discuss, the ability to create restrictions based on things being expired. So I've made a note of that. Is there anything else that I've talked about so far related to like basic information about a vendor that you feel I may not have covered, or you might have a question about right now? It's okay if you have other ones later too. I just thought I'd give an opportunity for anyone to ask anything else before we move away from this page.
Are the vendors able to update their contact information in Buildbase if they change employees that are working for them for logins and things like that?
Oh, great question. Vendors can definitely register for new accounts, but if right now I don't think we have any existing business processes in place where we have like a master vendor administrator at each vendor who is responsible for maintaining the like active status of all the employees that work for them or have access to the system as well. We have talked about that, but to my knowledge, that hasn't been implemented, but I can definitely ask.
So right now, if they change the people there, they would have to contact us to update their contacts in the system.
That's
So
correct.
they would get a different login.
That's correct. Or if maybe they had an employee that was had an end of service, they were no longer with the organization and they wanted to make sure that they, didn't access BuildBase any longer, that information would need to be communicated manually in order for that kind of deactivation to occur.
Okay.
I'm just writing that down. Okay,
and you said there's no way to do a purchase order, in the system. Everyone has to use BuildBase. Is that?
No, so purchase orders can be created. So purchase orders are all created in Dynamics. They are just viewed and kind of invoices are submitted or generated from BuildBase. But if you have any purchase orders you need to create that are like outside of a job, that can be done directly in Dynamics as well. And was that your question or did I miss the mark there?
No, I was just confused when you had made the comment that you couldn't do purchase orders. You don't use it. It's all done in BuildBase. So
no, yeah, sorry, I may have misspoke there. But all purchase orders live in the Dynamics ERP. They are just displayed in BuildBase, but any change to a purchase order, addition of a purchase order, closure of a purchase order is all initiated from Dynamics, the ERP itself.
okay.
Hey, Laura, I have a question as well.
Yeah.
And it might be, I'm ahead of the game here, but when we're doing a physical ACH payment,
Yes.
is that gonna automatically connect to our banking, or is that just notification?
So when you generate a payment, what it will do is produce I think it's a CSV file, and you would upload that to your bank in order to actually like transfer the funds.
Okay.
But the communication of the remittances would be done from Dynamics itself. So it would send all of the emails to the vendors who are being paid by that payment and say, hey, thanks for doing business with us. Your payment is going to be payment document number 12345. This payment will be processed on April 30th. And here are all the invoices that payment 12345 is going to cover. It displays each invoice number and invoice amount on their remittance advice, so that when they go through and receive that payment in their bank, they can reconcile exactly what that payment was for. Okay,
and when the CSV file is generated, can we opt not to use that?
I mean, yeah, there's nothing forcing you definitely to upload it. Can I ask what is the alternative mechanism that you would use to communicate to your bank what needs to be paid?
So we personally do ACH through our banking website, which goes through a verification process and then a final approval.
So we could revisit how we're doing it, because there are a couple of ways to go about doing ACH processing.
Okay.
So I think with the functionality we may be able to get from Dynamics, it would be a good opportunity for us to kind of relook at how we're doing it, why we're doing it, and what might be some, additional features that we haven't used in the past that could be good opportunity for us to streamline or make our current processes work a little even more efficiently.
Okay, sounds good.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely. We will for sure do testing, and I'll be interested kind of in learning more about that process and make sure we can build something that is best for your business process. So that is vendors. What I want to show next is, now that we kind of know sort of how to set up a vendor, what are the important things that we need to fill out when setting up a vendor, what I want to show you is where transactions end up when we transact against vendors. And that's in a screen that's called Vendor Ledger Entries, which is effectively like the accounts payable subledger. So I'm going to click on that now, and it brings me to a screen called Vendor Ledger Entries that shows me everything that I have entered against vendors. And you have the ability to filter by it, which you have on many other screens as well, by clicking on this kind of funnel icon, which will bring you a filter pane on the left-hand side here. So that if you're looking for something in particular, rather than sort of like scrolling endlessly, you can filter the information that's in this list to the right by a whole bunch of different criteria. And that ability, this filter function, is present on all of the list pages in Dynamics, so you can kind of go through this same filter exercise. For now, maybe I'll just hide it because we're not really looking for anything in particular at this second, but what this shows us is all of the AP subledger entries where vendor entries are recorded. And it shows us kind of the posting date, what type of transaction it is. So is it an invoice? Is it a payment? I don't know if I have any credit memos that are entered exactly at our convenience right now, but if it was a credit, it would say credit memo. It'll tell us both the kind of Dynamics document number that was created as a result of that transaction. It will present to us the vendor's invoice number. If they gave us one specifically here, it'll show the vendor code, their name, the description of the invoice. It'll show us the Bear Trustee or limited partner code that we've tagged to that transaction. It'll show us, I'm just going to scroll over to the right here so we can see some more columns, but it'll show us the payment method code we talked about, which was the ability to group payments. It'll show us the amount of that transaction, what's remaining for that line item, when it's due, and you can see this is a test company, as I mentioned, so some of them I haven't actually paid these invoices yet, so they're showing me they're red because we've passed the due date. So it's just letting me know, hey, these are red, you haven't paid them yet. If we have discounts that are applicable, it'll show me the discount date. And if we pay that invoice after the discount date, the system won't take the discount. So these are the dates that it uses to determine, based on the payment date or the posting date of us paying this invoice, should it take the discount or not. Open is a useful column to refer to. It shows us, it'll give us a check mark if the invoice is still open, or it will remove that check mark if the invoice has been closed. So by that, I mean, if we've paid the invoice, then that invoice is considered closed. So it will not have a checkbox here if that invoice has been fully paid. There is a column called on hold. And so we can enter data in this column, and the on hold gives us the ability to, I think we're allowed to enter 3 characters in this column. And if we populate any character in this column up to 3 characters, if the field is not blank and it's populated with a character, the system interprets that as meaning this invoice should be on hold. which means it will not be able to be paid by the system until that hold marker or hold character is removed. I think Dan was talking to me a little bit about that, and maybe we would use this for your lien releases. Perhaps we're going to work through that business process to make sure we have one that works. But he was talking that, maybe we use that for liens. What our current clients use that for is retention. So I'm not sure if that is applicable to your business, but sometimes here in Canada, we have to hold off on paying vendors for 45 days or so until they complete a statutory declaration that they're reporting that all of their obligations have been met, all of their subcontractors have been paid, and that the invoice, we are now able to pay that invoice. And so when if those documents and obligations have not yet been submitted to us, we have to hold that money. So we put a marker in this on hold field to prevent those invoices from being paid until someone dots all the I's and crosses all the T's and make sure we can make that payment. Perhaps that's something similar to the liens process that you go through. But the message is that if there is anything populated in this field, the system will not allow us to pay the invoice until we clear the message or clear the text. We would also kind of expose the 1099 field here. I have the T5, the Canadian version exposed here in this Canadian template, but we would make sure we have the 1099 indicator here to flag which invoices or vendor ledger entries for which we need to report subcontractor payments for 1099. So there's lots more columns available too. I think I've only exposed some of them here, but there's lots of properties of vendor ledger entries in the system. So if there's anything that I may not have covered right now, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It probably just means it's hidden and we need to expose it, which we can do very easily. Oh, and then it'll show the purchase order number here. So if this invoice related to a purchase order number, it would display that purchase order number here. I don't think I have any in this particular test company, but if I did, this is where it would show. So this is a really helpful screen for those who are responsible for accounts payable or making payments, to be able to kind of analyze what's going on, what's coming up, and allow us to kind of do analysis that way. We have some other features as well, which I might not go through in detail. Maybe we'll just kind of look at the PowerPoint for this. But if we need to change vendor numbers or merge vendor numbers, there is functionality for that as well. So if we created a vendor and we made a mistake or a typo in the vendor number, we have the ability to change it. Or if maybe that vendor, perhaps midway through doing business with us, they've changed their legal entity name and they're advising us that they shall be known by a different legal entity name going forward, but we want to retain all their history under the same vendor. We can do that by changing the vendor number. The important message is that all posted documents will retain the original, all documents that have already been posted will retain the original vendor name, but they're still searchable under both names, which is handy to be able to kind of track through. There's also a vendor merge function where maybe we have two vendors that were created because we have multiple accounts payable clerks in the system and both of them were creating a new vendor simultaneously for without knowing, and they want to merge vendors into one. There's a function that Dynamics has for that as well. So I just thought I'd mention that. I would imagine these would be kind of not so frequently used, but I did want to highlight that they were available. Yeah, let's do this too. Okay, so I included a few screenshots here, which I will send to you again after this meeting. but how to find certain bits of information. And I think sometimes, at least as I was learning, it was helpful to kind of have these screenshots to remember how to find things before I became proficient at it myself. So if we're looking to find which invoices were posted against a purchase order, which is perhaps something we'd need to do if the vendor reached out to us and said, how did you pay this purchase order number yet? And we want to be able to provide them that answer. We can do that this way, and I'll just kind of show you in the system. I'll drag this over here. We're going to look in here. I think I have some purchase orders in here. So we're going to go to our purchase orders screen. And maybe we'll look at a purchase order that's already been paid so we can find some data. So I'll go to my purchase order archive. And I think I probably have one here. So I find the purchase order that they are looking for information about, and I can press the invoices button. And so what this tells me is that this purchase order has been already invoiced. It was processed on this, processed via this invoice number, which is why the purchase order has now been archived. So we would say, okay, yes, we did receive or process your invoice against this purchase order. Here's the invoice number. And then if we were going through to figure out on which payment this invoice was paid, we can do that here by looking for that invoice number. And I'm just going to search for a different one here, but we can find that invoice number. I can see that for this invoice, it's no longer open, it's been paid. And I can say, okay, what was the payment number that this invoice was paid on? So I would look at the entry, find the entries that were applied against it, and it shows me that the payment number was indeed number 12, and it was paid on this date for this amount. So I did include kind of some screenshots in there of how to find different information that is, in my experience, most commonly asked, at least of vendors when they're looking for, when did you pay this? What was the payment number that you paid it on? How much did you pay? So I've kind of included that there, and vendor ledger entries is a great place to find that information. Maybe now we're going to review how to get invoices into the system. So obviously invoices can come in through Buildbase, whether that is if the vendors are submitting the invoices themselves, or if the invoices are being automatically generated on behalf of the vendor when we progress their schedule. So either of those two are viable options for how Dynamics would know to create an invoice. But to show you what it does when it's doing so, we're just going to go through it manually today and kind of walk through that exercise to see how we create an invoice. So when we create an invoice, it starts off as being called a purchase invoice. I have a quick link for it here. It's also found, if I were to click like this hamburger menu, it's also found on this left-hand side here called purchase invoices. So we can navigate to it through either screen. And when I click on it now, it's going to bring me to the workspace where accounts payable team members would be creating invoices and populating them and making sure everything looks good, but they haven't yet been posted to the system. So this screen, purchase invoices, is where we would see a list of invoices that accounts payable team members are preparing, but they haven't yet posted them. The moment that they do post them, they disappear, the invoice disappears from this screen, and instead of being on the purchase invoice list, it is shown on the posted purchase invoice list, which we'll go to once we actually post one. So right now, this is kind of like a preliminary area, a workspace where we're creating invoices. And once we post them, they disappear from this preliminary workspace and they end up in the posted purchase invoice list. So I'm going to create a new one right now. And we can either display this fact box information on the right. We have the ability to upload attachments here. So if you want to upload a copy of the vendor's invoice, because that's important to attach to the one that's generated in Dynamics, we can do that here. If it's not required, and then we have the ability to collapse this fact box pane just so we don't see it, so we can see more of the screen on the left. And for the most part, I think only the required fields are being displayed here. So first off, we would enter the vendor number that we are looking for, and we can do that by either clicking on the drop-down menu and scrolling to find it, or we also can type. So for example, the vendor that we were looking at before, I think was called like AAA Doors or something. So when I type AAA, what the system does is refines the vendor drop-down list here to any vendors that have data that match the criteria that I've just typed above. So it says, okay, well, you have 3 vendors that start with AAA. The one that we were looking at before was AAA Doors, so that's one I'm going to click on, but we could click on any of these other ones if that's in fact what we were looking for. So I'll click it now. By default, what the system does is it assumes that we want to post this invoice today, and that the the document date is today. But if that is not the case, and perhaps we want to amend those dates, we absolutely can. What the system does as well is calculates from this document date what the projected due date, or what the due date of the invoice is based on the payment terms that we have set up for this vendor. So this vendor is set up with end of month following payment terms, which I think we can see if their net 30, which in this case is similar to end of month following. But based on the rules that I had previously showed, with the document date of kind of April 17th, they are due to be paid on May 31st. So what we would do is, verify that these are the dates we want. If we want to change them, we would change them, and make sure that our due date, of course, is correct. We would type in, the vendor's invoice number. So I'll just type something in for now. This is a required field based on the configurations and my purchases and payables setup. So I've said that for accounts payable, it is required that I enter a vendor invoice number for every purchase invoice that I enter, and that's a choice. So if that is not a requirement for you, then we would make that amendment in the purchase and payable setup, and we would indicate this is not a required field, but this is a choice that I made, and said that a vendor invoice number is required for every invoice we enter. Posting description. So what you will have noticed is that the moment I populated a vendor number against this invoice, what happened was on the top left here, this information appeared. It said that, okay, your preliminary invoice number, your purchase invoice number right now is 2041 for AAA Doors. And this is part of the number series setup also in the purchase and payable setup that we looked at. So it says, okay, well, as you are creating these temporary kind of purchase invoices in your workspace and finalizing them, well, the system will assign a number to each one. In this case, it's assigned 2041. So that when I go back a screen, if I was working on an invoice and my colleagues were working on different invoices, we all have different numbers that have been created here. The vendor invoice number is obviously different. This is just a system generated number from the number series configuration for our purchase invoices. I'm going to click on the invoice again and go back into it. And what you'll notice is that by default, the posting description also has this same number. And what I'm going to share with you is that if I don't change it to something that is more meaningful, this is going to be the description that's posted alongside to the GL. Obviously, we're going to enter a description for our line items here, and those descriptions will always live on the line items for this invoice, but at like the summary level, so the accounts payable posting group level, the GL account to where the other side of this entry is going to post, the description on the GL is going to say this, which to me isn't the most meaningful piece of information, because once we post this invoice number is going to change, and it's actually going to become a PP number, posted purchase invoice number, and it is possible that the number will be different. So what I recommend, if it is valuable to your business process, is that when invoices are entered manually, you have the ability to change this to be something more meaningful, so that whoever's doing analysis, of the accounts payable subledger, they could see what this invoice was for. They could obviously always drill into it and get the even more further details about it, but on the GL level, I might find it useful for myself to have something more meaningful here than this number, which won't mean anything to me after it's posted. So we could say like office signs or something. And so that when this gets posted and I look at my accounts payable subledger, I'll say, oh, we paid AAA doors for office signs. That's what this was. I don't even need to drill into it. So that's why this is here. So I just wanted to describe that a little bit. Again, it's not mandatory. You change it. It's completely optional. But I find it helpful if it is entered with something that's a bit more meaningful than the kind of by default description that appears. So this is the kind of header of the purchase invoice. And then we're going to get into the lines. So the lines is where we can enter, details and line items of our invoice. And typically, we have the ability to enter invoices with different types. So either right now, I would say most common are GL account and item. So GL account would be something that we would post or select if we are posting an invoice outside of a job. So we want to post it directly to the GL. Like in my example here, I'm doing office signs. I'm probably not going to code this invoice to a job because it's, perhaps for like main office, so it's not relevant to a job. I'm going to post this to some expense account, which is, I don't know any of the numbers offhand, but like we'll just, I don't know, pick one. It's not really, doesn't matter. Anyway, we'll just pick one. We are not going to populate a job number here because this invoice is not going to be coded to a job, but we do need to enter the quantity and the direct unit cost. Those are mandatory fields. So even if we're only entering one, I do need to enter the one in the quantity field. Maybe it's for like $10,000 or something. So I enter a direct unit cost of $10,000. My tax configuration from the vendor automatically comes through. And I'm going to say that this particular office sign, we are going to pay tax on it. So I'll select the tax code for that. And for this company setup, we are required to select a Bear trustee or limited partner on every single transaction. That's also a choice. So we can, as we work through your business processes, we can figure out if that is required or not. In this particular company it is, so I need to select one here, which I'm going to do now. Otherwise, the transaction will not let me successfully post. But again, that's a choice that we will work through as we review kind of your business processes and what makes the most sense for you. And that's on this basic invoice, that's all I'm going to enter on the lines. We have the ability to enter many lines. And so what I would do in this case is once I've finished entering my lines, I look and make sure that my subtotal is correct, my taxes are correct. And then what I would do is I would go to the menu at the top here that says posting, and I would press post. And it'll ask me one time if I am sure I want to post this invoice, and I'm going to say yes. And it processes the transaction, and it tells me that the invoice is posted as number PP. So it added a P, which the number series configuration, and this acronym means posted purchase invoice with the number, and it says it moved it to the posted purchase invoices window. Do we want to open it? Typically, you'd at this stage, you'd say no, but I will say yes, just so we can take a look at it. And it did open it here. There's nothing too exciting about it. It looks very similar to what we just entered on the previous screen. The only difference is everything is gray because it is no longer editable. We have created this invoice. We've posted it into the system. It's now called a posted purchase invoice. And what that means is that the document will live on forever. It cannot be deleted. It's always going to be there. It's a fixed part of the system now because it's posted, and that is part of Microsoft's design, that once a transaction or document is posted in the system, it can no longer be removed or undone. They do have some tools which allow us to correct information that we're going to go through now. But I just wanted to highlight that fact that if a document has been posted in the system, whether if it's a document or if it's a transaction, it can no longer be undone. We can do correcting entries, but we can no longer delete it and make it disappear. Excuse me. And that is part of Microsoft's design. So this invoice exists. We'll be able to review it. We can go to our vendor ledger entries as well and take a look at it. And it will appear as kind of the one at the top that we've entered. So now it appears in our vendor ledger entries. It didn't before. You can see the description here is office signs. And if I didn't make that change, you'll notice that the one below that I've posted has just this preliminary invoice number listed in the description, which is a bit less meaningful. Again, it's a choice if you want to change that or not, but that just shows the difference in how the description at the header level will be viewed if you don't change it.
Hey, Laura, I have
yeah.
a question.
Yeah.
Is there also a way to add like approval on those bills posting?
Yeah, so for anything that is generated through Buildbase, the approvals will be set up through Buildbase. So that's anything that is job related, any invoices that are coming through Buildbase for jobs, or any invoices that are coming through for purchase orders. Even this one, we could have created a purchase order for. We could have told our sign company, here's your purchase order in Buildbase. Please submit your invoice through Buildbase. If they did that, then all of the approvals would happen through the Buildbase system. If though, as we know, not everything has a purchase order associated with it, and in this particular case, I said that it didn't, then the answer is yes, you can set up workflows in Buildbase to have a different individual than the person who created the invoice to be able to approve and post that invoice. I don't have any set up for us today to demonstrate, but the answer is yes, that can be
possible. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, something like department head approval if it's related to that department or something like that.
For sure.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so now we can see the invoice on the vendor ledger entry. What I'll show you now, maybe we entered this invoice and we thought we did it correctly, but when we looked at it in this posted purchase invoice screen, we realized that we have made a mistake. And as I mentioned to you, we can't delete it and make it disappear anymore because it's been posted. But Dynamics does give us some options here at the top to correct it. And I'll kind of just go through each of these and describe each one. Dynamics does just try and describe each one as well. If you hover over it, it gives you some text that tells you what's going to happen, and it's pretty good. But I'll just kind of summarize it in my own words. Is when you click correct, what will happen is the invoice will, all of the information that's present on this invoice will be populated automatically to a credit memo. And that credit memo will be posted automatically and applied against this original invoice. And so there's two things that'll happen. One, when I press correct, one is that the credit memo will be created with all of these same fields and descriptions, and it'll be applied against this original invoice, which means both the invoice and the credit that are created are both applied against each other, so they become no longer open in the system. They close each other off. And the second thing that happens when I press this button is that a new posted purchase invoice will be created that allows the user to edit it prior to posting. So and sometimes that can be useful if we had maybe not so much with this example I gave because it was pretty simple, but if I had entered a whole bunch of lines here and I didn't realize till after I posted it that I had made some mistakes, then it's helpful to have that new purchase invoice be opened where I can just, correct the few mistakes I made, but I don't have to like re-enter each line manually. So it gives me that opportunity to review that invoice again to make any corrections I need to make before I post it. So effectively, though it doesn't delete my original purchase invoice, it undoes the effect of that purchase invoice by creating a matching credit memo, posting them against each other to close them off, and then creating a new purchase invoice for me to edit prior to posting. So that's what correct does. Cancel just does the first part of what I said, which is creates the corresponding credit memo, applies them against each other, and then that's the end. So it effectively undoes what I did through creating a new document and of a credit memo type and applying them against each other. But it doesn't open up a new purchase invoice for me with all of these values to preview and edit before I post. It does not do that. It just effectively cancels what I had done and stops there. The third option, create corrective credit memo, what that does is, maybe this is like an internal invoice and I entered 10,000, but it should have only been 9,000. And because it's internal, I don't need to like present it to a vendor or anything, or they're not going to see it on a remittance advice. So when I press create corrective credit memo, what it'll do is just kind of half of what I have explained already. Is it creates that credit memo, populates all the information in it, but doesn't post it. It lets me view it first and allows me to make changes first. So maybe I would say I'm going to enter my credit memo of 1,000 so that the net impact of this invoice is that it is effectively for 9,000 and allows me to edit that credit memo prior to posting. It does apply them against one another so that there's only 9,000 remaining on this invoice here. So as I mentioned, Dynamics does describe these when you hover over them. I've also described them sort of in different words on the PowerPoint that I'll send you. But this is the way we can go and edit information after we post something. Given the fact that Dynamics doesn't let us go and delete it and make it disappear anymore, it does kind of give us these tools to be able to make the edits we need to make.
Hi, Laura.
Yes.
Sorry, really quick question. When you when it automatically creates the credit memo and posts a new invoice, or just creates the credit memo, is it just doing it for the like current date, like today's date? So like, let's say if we had an invoice from like a month ago and then you went through the process of doing this, would it just plop in today's date?
It would do it as of the posting date of the original document. So if we had closed that period and then realized we wanted to make a correction, it would give us an error message that we couldn't use that posting date anymore, and would allow us to change that posting date to either be more current, that's in a period that is still open, accounting period that is still open, or maybe it was important to us that we go and affect that accounting period. We would have to go and open up that accounting period in Dynamics, and then initiate this process so that this original posting date could be used. Does that make sense?
Right. No, that makes sense. So if the period is closed, we could still use the correct option, but it would just make us choose a current date, essentially.
That's right. Yeah, if the period has been closed, imagine like it's May now and we've closed April, we will be prevented, hard stop, from posting anything to April 17th anymore. So at that point, we have two options. We can change the date to be May 1st, or we can go and open up the accounting period of April to allow us to use a posting date of April 17th.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. We also have the ability to copy documents. So imagine if you have, probably not super relevant with this Office Signs example, but if you have an invoice that the vendor sends you every month outside of Buildbase, so it's not related to purchase orders, but they send you this like recurring invoice every month, and maybe it has lots of line items, and you aren't, you might wish for there to be a way to kind of like copy an invoice from a previous month so that you can use that template in the current month. You're able to do that. And we can do that by using this actions button at the top, where you can click on actions, and then we press, I think there's a function, actually, hold on, let me go back one screen. Oh, here, I know what we do. I don't do it all the time, so sometimes I forget. My apologies. What you do is you start creating a new purchase invoice, and you select the vendor that you want to create it for. So let's just use our famous AAA Doors example again, except I think let's see what it's not happy about. So it's giving me an error message. Hold on, we're going to try this one more time. And am I in the company? I think I am. Yeah, I don't know what I did wrong. It didn't like me for a second. But I enter the vendor number, and then on this new invoice, I can click on actions, functions, and copy document. So I'm saying go and get information from a document that's previously been posted. And so it says, okay, well, what document do you want me to get? So what I'm going to tell the system is we're going to use the example that we just created. So I want it to go get the posted invoice that has been created for AAA Doors previously. And we can find the invoice number, which I think I put like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it was this one. I'm going to click it. And I'm going to say, okay, please bring me the details for this document. So what it does is it goes and retrieved all that information. So this isn't too glamorous an example right now because we only had one line item on that invoice. But if we had many, we might value this feature a little bit more. If there was, 15 line items that I didn't have to rekey, that would be great. What it does is it says the information is from this invoice. If you don't want to retain that information anymore, you could delete that line, because that we just use this as a mechanism to kind of save time. We don't actually need to know the fact, where this information came from. That was just a text line. I could have pulled in the header information. I think I forgot to click that toggle, but whatever. Those say office signs here, put in their new invoice number, and indicate, if there should be tax or not. But it would have brought forward some information that perhaps would save us some rekeying time, which might be nice. So I just wanted to mention that that's possible. I'm not sure if you could see that being valuable in any of your business processes, but I did want to just tell you, I guess, that it existed. So we'll post this one for fun. And in this case, maybe we won't look at it. But it was posted, and what you can observe is that it disappeared from this purchase invoices screen, which I told you that it would do, and instead it went to the posted purchase invoice screen, which is here, posted purchase invoices. And now you can see these are the two invoices that we entered together today. So they're now appearing in here, posted purchase invoices rather than just purchase invoices.
Laura, can we set an invoice to reoccur on its own monthly?
Yes, there are recurring functionalities. I am not an expert with those right now, but because they haven't been, I guess, needed yet in the clients that we've served. But there is definitely a recurring functionality that I can demonstrate at a later time once I get some practice.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, there's also recurring journal entries. One thing I also wanted to mention, I'm not sure if Dan has covered this already, but I'll just share it now and kind of put the bug in your ear in case you might find it valuable in future or as we walk through your business processes, is something that we've called invoice on behalf of. And in our experience, what we have tried to recommend to clients is that we want to use purchase orders wherever we can, because it's nice to be able to track both the approval of the purchase orders themselves in BuildBase and also the approval of the related invoices against those purchase orders also in BuildBase. But occasionally, in our experience, maybe there is like a company that's bigger than us that may have no interest or in using BuildBase because it's just not part of their business process. For example, like an equipment rental company. If we were to go and rent equipment from them, they're simply going to mail us their invoice. And, if they're a national equipment rental company, they will perhaps not be too keen on learning our software and submitting invoices in BuildBase, but we want to be able to leverage that approval tracking in BuildBase rather than having to enter their invoices manually in Dynamics, as I've just shown. We have the ability to configure like our accounts payable team, for example, to be able to submit invoices on their behalf. And no invoices will go or emails will go to them or anything. But it just allows us to be able to create POs for equipment rental and be able to track, approved spend and cost for equipment rental and track who approved those POs and then submit our own administration team can submit invoices on behalf of those vendors in BuildBase so that they go to the right people for approval. Like we don't have to run around, tracking site people down or trying to like generate DocuSign invoices to get them to approve these equipment rental, we can just, simply submit it through BuildBase, and they're already going through their regular invoice approval processes in BuildBase to approve, construction progress and invoices from vendors. So we have found that on a number of occasions, our clients have taken advantage of this opportunity to be able to, again, leverage those tracking functionalities of who approved what invoices. But even though the vendor, may not be interested in learning about BuildBase or submitting invoices against BuildBase, it's just part of their, national invoicing process to spit out the invoice and it gets mailed or emailed to us. And if we don't pay it, then they just simply won't rent to us anymore. We do have the ability for to allow us or certain users within our team to be able to submit, the accounts payable team, for example, to be able to submit invoices on a vendor's behalf. This could also be useful if, like, maybe the vendor lost internet access and they wanted to submit a bunch of invoices, and they came to you and said, please, can you help us? We want to make sure we submit them today so that they make the cutoff. That's another situation or scenario where invoice on behalf of can be used. So I'm not sure if kind of Dan mentioned that, but I just thought I'd share it now. And it probably won't be used like incredibly frequently, but it is possible to do. So that is that. Another way we can get invoices into the system is through Excel. So we know that Excel is a very important part of the world of, the accounting and administration teams. And it also can be important to creating invoices. And as a result, we've created a tool which allows accounts payable team members to import an Excel spreadsheet of invoices to Dynamics. So rather than entering them one by one, perhaps, maybe the information is communicated to us in some sort of Excel format, or it's easy for us to copy and paste into Excel, or maybe we're doing like tax payments for properties, and we track all those in Excel, and rather than entering, one purchase invoice per property, it would be useful to kind of import them from some sort of Excel template. We can do that. So I wanted to kind of show you how that's done. So you don't go to the purchase invoices screen, because that screen only allows you to enter one at a time. Instead, you go to something that we've built called purchase document. Right now it's called staging worksheet, but I think we're renaming it to import worksheet, because import may resonate a little bit better with people, because that's what we're actually doing. So I'm going to click on it here. And what it's showing me is a screen where we're going to kind of like a temporary screen or another workspace where we're going to import data into. And we're going to import it from an Excel template. And how do you know the format of what your Excel template should be? Well, you can determine that by clicking on this Actions button at the top, and then Process, and then there's a button called Export Excel Template. So I'm going to click that now, and it's going to download it to my Chrome here, and I'm going to open it. And this just shows you the column headers that are available for you to populate. So this is the format of how the data needs to be entered, and it must be in this format. Otherwise, the system won't be able to read it. So it's important that we keep the columns in this order and not kind of have any extra ones in between. So this is the format, but what I'm going to do is now that you know how to export what the format should be, I'm going to show you one that has data populated in it, which I just need to find on my other screen. And here it is. So this is the exact same thing that I just showed you, just with some data in it. So what I've done is I've created 10 invoices and 10 credit memos. And this import tool allows you to import both, so invoices and credit memos. And the way that you determine or tell the system what it is through this document type column. And so you tell the system, is this an invoice or is this a credit memo? And based on the selection that you input here, that's how the system will know what to create. So you indicate the posting date that you want to post this document. You tell the system if it's an invoice or a credit memo. In this case, as I mentioned, in this test company that I've created, the Bear Trustee or limited partner code is required. So I put in that code here. The document date I've put here, the due date. So I put document date as April 1st, which is the same as the posting date. And I indicated that the due date should be April 30th. I have created invoices for a few vendors here. I just picked the first kind of few at the top in the list. I've indicated what the vendor invoice number should be, which I think for fun, I might just add, can't remember if I've actually posted this already. So I'm just going to create a unique one for each one. I just can't, honestly, sorry, I can't remember if I posted that one already. So each vendor invoice number against a particular vendor code has to be unique. So I'm just gonna make sure it's unique so we don't get an error and make up a vendor number that, or invoice number I don't think I've used before. There's a column called payment method code, which we talked about. This was the grouping of invoices, and I'm choosing to leave it blank because I want the system to just use the payment method code that's on the vendor card. But if for some reason you wanted it to be different, you have the ability to set that here. For posting description, you can type in what you want that description to be on the GL account. This happens to be like a template I was using for migrating some open AP, so that's why it's a boring description, but you can definitely make it more colorful and meaningful to be posted against the GL. Then we get into like our lines section. So we have to indicate if it's to a GL account or in this case, this isn't to a job. So I'm using GL account. I'm prescribing what the GL account should be. Because there's no job, I have that blank here. These are other dimensions that sometimes are used, but in my example here, we're just going to keep it simple and I'm not going to populate it. I definitely need to populate the quantity and the direct unit cost for every line. So I've done that here. And these are the line item descriptions. So this is where I get into like the details about that line. And then I can put in my tax code here. If the invoice has retention applicable to it, a percent, you can indicate that here. I haven't done an example for that one yet, but what retention is, I mentioned that we put invoices on hold to make sure we don't pay them. But if I were to indicate here that this invoice has retention, I could do so by putting like a number 10 here, which is a typical percent for us, where we have to retain 10% of the invoice and not pay the vendor immediately that 10% until they've met all the criteria that are required in order for us to release that 10%. So what happens is if a retention invoice is being created, which in this case right now I've indicated that it would be, the system will do 3 things when it creates this invoice. The first thing is that it will create the invoice, in this case for $300. And it'll post it normally, just like we did in the example together a few moments ago. The second thing it will do is it'll create a credit memo for 10% of this amount. So it will create a $30 credit memo, and it will apply it to this original invoice, which means that when this invoice comes due, we will only immediately be paying the vendor $270. The third thing it'll do is right after it creates the credit memo for $30 or 10%, it'll also create an invoice of that same value, $30, and put it on hold. So that's where that whole hold concept comes into play for retention for us, is that 10% invoice, the system acknowledges that 10% is still outstanding and due to the customer, but we need to pay it at a different time. And that time is determined when that vendor has met all the criteria that they need to meet in order to release that hold or release that, approve that retention invoice on their account, at which point someone would manually go and remove that hold marker on the vendor ledger entry. But that's what this retention percent column is for, is to indicate that yes, this invoice applies to retention. So don't just create the invoice for $300, also create the credit for $30 so that we only pay them $270 immediately, and also create the corresponding invoice of $30 and mark it on hold so that we know it's due, but the system won't automatically trigger us to pay it until someone manually goes through and says, yes, this invoice is ready to be paid. Retention can be released. We won't do that now because that's not exactly what I was trying to showcase in this moment, but we're just kind of demonstrating the import functionality, but I just thought I'd talk about it because it was here. So this is our import example. So I'm going to save the worksheet here. So this is my Excel. I've prepared it. I reviewed it. It looks good. So I'm going to close it now, and I'm going to come back to this purchase document staging worksheet page. And I'm going to say, please import my file from Excel. And it'll say, do you want to import your file from Excel? And I say, yes. And it says, okay, well, where do I find your file? So I tell it where it is, and I'm going to import it now. And here we are. So what it did is it imported all that information into this space. And it also added a column here called status. And what it does is it goes and checks all of my information. So it says, do I have a valid vendor number per the text that you entered in the vendor number column in the Excel? And is everything required here? Do you have a quantity? Do you have a direct unit cost? It validates and checks all of our data to make sure we did a good job populating it. If we made a mistake, what we would see in this status column is something that says validation error. And we could refer to the right-hand side of the page in this fact box section in the errors at the bottom. And in this kind of gray box will be some text that appears in red that tells us what the error is. And at that point, we have two options. We can correct the information in this screen here and press this validate button to revalidate it and get the system to check again and make sure that our correction is what it was looking for. Or maybe we had our column order out of whack in our Excel spreadsheet. So when we imported this, everything went into the one column to the left, and so the system had lots of validation errors, and we feel it might just be easier if we fix our Excel instead. We have the ability to kind of select all of our rows here. We could delete them, and we could go fix our Excel and then re-import the data and make sure that all of our rows are validated. Once they are, which in this case they are, we have two options. We can, so this again is like a workspace or a staging area. So though we've imported the data, it hasn't actually created any purchase invoices yet. So, and we can see that actually as well by looking at this column on the right where it says purchase document number. And right now it's blank. So there are no purchase documents created yet. We have only imported the data. So again, we have two options. We can create a single document, which based on whatever row I'm selected on, which I can tell by viewing this little arrow here, and wherever the blue cell is indicated that I'm clicked on, I can create a single document for whatever row I'm clicked on, or I can create all documents if I want to create them all at once. So I think that's what I'll do, is press the Create All Documents button. And it says, do you want to create purchase documents for all? I'm going to say yes. And so it told me that it's created 19 purchase documents. What you'll notice is that now the purchase document number column has been populated, and we have purchase invoices created, purchase credit memos created, but they're not posted yet. So if you'll remember, the single P.inv is like that, just a purchase invoice or a purchase credit memo, which is that kind of initial number that is created upon opening of the document, but not until there's like a PP as the prefix to this number is it posted. So it's what this process does is it creates purchase invoices and or purchase credit memos for us quickly via the Excel, but it doesn't post them. So we still have to go to our purchase invoices list or our purchase credit memos list in this example, which we can do one of two ways. We can click on a single one and it'll navigate to that document and we can post it. So it posted it, it created this number, but we're not going to open up the posted one and look at it because it's not too exciting. It's just everything is the same as before. It's just great. Or if we want to post them all together in a batch, we can go to our purchase invoices page and it'll show all the invoices that are left that I haven't posted yet. And I can highlight them all and I can press posting and then post batch. And it'll say what it interprets is that for all of the invoices that have been selected by me, it displays those selections in this number filter here. And it just asked me to confirm the posting date. So yes, April 1st is the date I wanted to post these. These are all the ones I want to post. And I would press OK. And it just goes through that posting activity for all of those purchase invoices. And if I go back to my staging worksheet page, what you'll notice is the list here has reduced, because for every document that is posted, it removes it from this like temporary workspace because it recognizes that it posted it. So we no longer want to display the data in this staging worksheet because we've already posted it. So we wouldn't want to mistakenly post it again. So all that's left are the credit memos, which are we haven't gone to create one yet, but they're the same as purchase invoices. They're just credit memos. One point I will make is that for credit memos, because it's inherent, we're being explicit that we're entering a credit memo, the system knows that it is a credit memo, so you don't actually have to enter a negative, and you should not enter a negative. The system won't like that. It'll tell you that it doesn't want that. It'll give you an error message. So you'll notice that all of my amounts here are still positive, even though credits are going to be created, because we've told the system it's a credit memo, so inherently it already knows the type of sign it needs to post. So I'm going to go to the purchase credit memos list now, which is here. And here are those purchase credit memos in our list. And I can do the same thing, which is selecting them all, press posting, and post batch if I want to post them all together. You can absolutely post them one by one, but in my scenario, I would like to post them all together. It'll just ask you to reconfirm the posting date of all of them. It'll tell you all the credit memos it's going to post for you. You can press OK, and it's going to go through the exercise of posting each one and then tell you that all of the documents were processed. If I go back to this staging worksheet, all of my rows are gone because all of the documents I uploaded via the Excel have been posted. And if I go, we just posted those purchase credit memos. So if I go to the posted credit memos screen, posted purchase credit memo screen, I see all of those credit memos that were just posted. So this tool is a way to create both purchase invoices and purchase credit memos in but create multiple at once. And one thing I did forget to mention is that a lot of things in Dynamics are done by batches or by groups. And what I mean by that is we need to select a batch prior to creating journals or creating invoices. And the purpose of that is so that multiple of us can be working on the same thing at the same time without interfering with each other's work. So I'm going to click on this drop down here, and many of our journals will always have this default batch, but maybe in our case, we might have 2 accounts payable clerks that like to use this purchase document staging worksheet and import invoices from Excel. And maybe each of those people are responsible for different invoices, but they still want to use the same tool. They could create a batch. So if I'm one of those people, I would maybe create a batch name called Laura, and someone else might create a batch name called like Joe. And so I do all of my work in the Laura batch, and Joe does all of his work in the Joe batch. And then we're able to, so I've just switched to the Laura batch. I would have been working in here. Joe can be working on his batch, so we can be using the same tool at the same time without interfering with one another. So it's just a way to organize the data in a way that allows us to be flexible and be using the same functions at the same time without interfering with one another. And this is common. You'll see this in many of the different types of journals, just so we can have multiple kind of going on at once, which is good. So that's kind of purchase invoices and how we can create them both manually and through an Excel. I know we have a lot of time together at this meeting, so I'm not sure if people are feeling that they might want to take like a 10-minute break to, bio break, grab a snack before we continue. We might not need the full rest of the time, but we still have a little bit to do. So if people, I'm happy to keep going, but if people might want to just take a break from their eyes from the screen, I'm happy to, respect that and let people take a break. How are people feeling?
I think that's a good
idea.
Why don't we take 10 minutes and I'll leave it all up.
Okay, that sounds great. So thanks for sharing that. Let's all kind of take a break, rest our eyes, or grab a coffee or grab some water, and we'll meet back in 10 minutes and continue.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
So one of the reports that we do is this like income where both is from state and it has each individual and it all. So I guess I was thinking in an ideal world, dynamics, the way it would be set up is that we have the CCH Calgary, which include and then the CCH Edmonton, which obviously is the Edmonton, and then that one that you have called it would be everybody.
I did talk to Carrie about this based on your email, today. And we'll be able to do this. Some of this will have to be done outside the system. And Carrie and I are talking that we might have to set up another company called CCH Consolidated for this purpose. So you would use the CCH we currently set up as a real company that actually is building things and paying payroll and doing things. And then a CCH dash consolidation, maybe your consolidated company. Carrie and I did discuss that. She's not here today. So one, we need to continue to ask the question, but we did, Carrie and I did talk about it.
Sorry, I was introduced. HED put in companies for the jobs that my understanding the project that are underneath CCH. As edge is not the same HED that is in the system we have at this point in time. The companies CCH actually other than the dynamic companies that we're referring to. If you manage the projects that are done in CCH in the CCH company, not the other company, then Corey will have to manage the library. In both of those companies, if you do that, not that you shouldn't do that, but that's the fact you have to manage the library. And both of those things manage the vendors, both of those. So if you want one like a library, one better library, then the projects that are under construction that are being built needs to be part of the Calgary, not part of the CCH. They can get Calgary again, both work. It's just a matter of understanding different things we consume. So I just wanted to create that clarity. So I should talk to Gary that it's very clear that if you decide to build a CCH company, there's a time to purchasing and circumstance.
No, it would be a standalone company, not attached to it. Can you shift over to the left, Mackenzie, just to make sure that I'm on the right page?
Like this CCH total.
Yep. Come on in.
I'm really
Hey.
sorry. I
Oh,
know.
no, you're fine. We're in a break. I've been on the training call about multitasking.
All right.
What's up?
So the stuff that I was gonna do was looking at the revised forecast. Mike just told me that he has like a whole meeting planned tomorrow with Carlos and Kevin to kind of go over everything.
Okay.
Do you want me to still do this or wait till he comes back with feedback? Because he sounds like we're overlapping a little bit.
Well, I think it's,
I'm muted.
I'm not muted. Oh, oops. Sorry, guys.
All good. Business keeps going. We'll just give people another minute. Okay, so I'm not sure. Is everyone back now?
I'm back.
Okay, thanks, Jenny. I know I heard Stuart take a call, so I muted him, but I'm not sure about Lillian or Candy or Shelley. I just want to make sure it's okay if we start now.
I'm here.
Okay, awesome. Perfect. Well, I think most of us are back, so we will continue. So the topics that I have left in our agenda right now are bank accounts and generating a payment, voiding payments, and then maybe just like taking a quick look at one of the out of the box reports. So we're definitely more than halfway there, so that's great. So what we're going to look at is bank accounts first. So I have a link for bank accounts on our homepage here. And this is the bank accounts for your company. Obviously, this is test data here. So we'll just look at the first one in our list. And this is where we're going to populate all the information about the bank account that we want to transact with. So we need to create a number for it. Forgive this number here. This is just test data that I was playing with. But you would probably create something a little bit more meaningful. If we're going to use Bear Trustees or limited partner codes, we'd probably combine that maybe into your code. But we can talk about that as we walk through your business process and understand how many bank accounts you use and what is the best way to kind of denote those. But we have our bank account name, all of our important account numbers, so our bank branch number, transit, bank account number. We have the ability to indicate whether checks require 2 signatures or not. So if this is off, only 1 signature line will print. If it's on, then 2 signature lines will print. We also have this field called alternate company name. So we have, by default, typically, when a check prints from Dynamics, the name on the check will be the name that is present in the company information screen of Dynamics. So right now, mine's just obviously a test company, Demo Home Builder, but so typically that's what would print on the check. But if you have different, maybe like limited partners or bank accounts, and they have different names that need to print on the check, that's where you would indicate that here in the alternate company name, or really it's like the alternate bank account name, company's bank account name. In this case, I don't have one, but this is where you would indicate if it should, and if it does, this is the name that'll print on the check on the top left rather than the one in company information. Oh, and I forgot to indicate the difference between these 2 fields. So there's a bank account number field and a bank account number for MICR field. So sometimes bank account numbers, though this is the way they need to be presented on an electronic funds payment document, CSV file, when the actual check prints, sometimes they have like extra characters in here, like hyphens. So this is the field that will be used when the check prints so that we can display those hyphens if they're required. If not, we would just simply duplicate this bank account number in this field here. But sometimes bank accounts, at least in my experience, some of them require hyphens, and this is the space where we indicate that. Our communication fast tab is where we indicate the address of the bank that we want to print on the check. The phone number isn't really used for anything, so it's not required, but you can enter it there for fun. Posting section, this is where we would indicate the last check number that was used for this bank so that it knows what check number should print on the next one. So in this case, we've printed check number 14, which means the very next check that the system will print will be number 15. So typically during testing, we just enter any random number in here because it is required in order to print a check, or so that the system knows what check number to put on the check. But before you go live, it'll all be test data until you actually go live, because then and only then is when you're going to know what your last check number was in your previous ERP and what it should be in this new company now. Similar thing with remittance advices. So ACH files, we would indicate what the last number was in your old system, the last one before you cut over to this system, and that's when you would populate this field. Otherwise, during our testing, we just enter any random number, just so the file will generate. So it is a required field in order to generate EFT file, but you obviously won't know what the actual one will be for your production environment until you actually cut over. So up until then, it's just test data. For this currency code field, I should mention that as long as the currency code of this account is the same currency code as is set up for your system, you leave this blank. The only time you populate it is if the currency code for this account is going to be different. So if you have multi-currencies and you have a bank account that's in a currency of one other than the one that you operate on in this system by default, then and only then would you populate it. Otherwise, you leave it blank and the system assumes it's the same currency code that you're operating in for the rest of the system. Posting groups. So here again, we've run across posting groups. So this is another space where we need to be specific and tell the system that when we transact with this bank account, what is the corresponding GL account that should be affected when we draw down from this bank account. And the best practice is to have a one-to-one relationship between bank account and GL account number. So each bank account should have a unique GL account number set up in the bank account posting groups so that reconciliation is simpler. So in this case, I have a list of my bank account posting groups, and I have one per GL account. And I find it's also best, in this case, it's not the greatest example because I'm playing around with some test data. Oh no, here. Maybe I changed it by accident, but I think that it is best practice for your bank account posting group code to be the same as your bank account code, because then it's just easier for people to relate the two pieces of data. And again, best practice is one GL account per bank account. On the bottom section here is where we enter information for like EFTs or ACH information. So this is where you indicate, the client number that your bank prescribes to you, or the client name, the short name. All of these pieces of data will appear in the appropriate spot in the ACH file. As we walk through the process, that your business process, as we discussed earlier, and determine, if indeed you will be using the files that Dynamics produces, this is where we will inspect that file, make sure it matches the one that your bank requires, because every character is important, and it's important we get it perfect. But these fields and pieces of data do appear in that file, and we'll make sure they all end up in the right spot. But this is where the kind of that ACH information is configured.
Hi, Laura. I have a question with the bank account posting group.
Yeah.
Is that the mapping to the GL account?
Yes, exactly. So here,
Okay.
you can see that this bank account posting group code that I've created is going to map to this GL account number. So that's exactly what it is.
Okay, so we have like different division that we have different checking accounts or bank accounts related to each of those division.
Okay.
Would that also trigger something for intercompany entries?
There may be some intercompany entries required as a result, and that will be something that we'll need to walk through as we kind of review and I further understand your business processes, because I haven't really been exposed to any just yet.
Okay.
But yes, there may be some entries that are required based on the kind of setup that you're discussing, for sure.
Sure. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. So this is where we set up the information about the bank so that we can cut checks and generate ACH payments from the bank. Before we navigate away from this screen, the other thing that I'll show is if we decide that the Bear Trustee or limited partner kind of code is important, and if you have like multiple business lines or companies sort of that you need to track, and you only ever transact against one of those companies from a bank account, the way that we can make sure that those rules are set up properly is by tagging the bank account with the Bear Trustee dimension, which we can do from the bank account button here and going to the dimensions button, and that's where we can indicate what limited partner Bear Trustee code should be tagged against that bank account. So I'll just show you this now. It's possible that perhaps not all those decisions have been made yet, so we're not sure if we're going to use this, but I just wanted to kind of show you it exists so that we might be triggered to remember it as we're walking through all of your processes. So that's how we set up bank accounts. It's pretty easy. And then we want to generate some payments and learn how to do that. So the way that we do that is through something called payment journals, which I don't think I may have created a shortcut for on this page yet. I can't remember. There, I did it through the cash management side, so in our like further detailed version of our role center. So it's found here. We could have searched for it as well, or we could put a shortcut for it on the main page too. But payment journals is the space that we go to in Dynamics in order to prepare payments. So I'm going to click that now. And what you'll notice when I first clicked on it is that it again has this kind of batch organization that we talked about when we were doing the importing of worksheets, because it might be the case that multiple people on our accounting team might be responsible for preparing different payments at the same time. So if that's true, we can create multiple batches for people. So, I could have another one called Laura, and we can have Laura and Joe again, like we did in our other example. And this is the space where I'm going to work and prepare my payments so that I don't interfere with anybody else. And maybe I'll just say, I'll give it a description. So I'm going to say, I'm going to prepare the April 30th payments in here, or the April 30th checks or something, so that people know what I'm doing and what I'm working for in here. And where am I going to pay those checks out of? Well, I need to tell the system what bank account I want to use. So there's different balancing account types we can select, but probably more often than not, you're going to select bank account. And you're going to pick the bank account number that you're going to work with. So we'll just click on the one we were looking at before. So I've now created my own batch where I can work without interfering with anyone else. So I want to drill into this batch now. This is kind of like my header area. And now I want to drill into it to create my payment details. And I can do that by pressing process and then edit journal. And it brought me to the batch, the Laura batch. So it says batch name over here and Laura. So I know that I'm in my space. This is where I'm allowed to be, and I can work with the data in here. I'll just expand this column a little bit so we can fully see the date. And maybe I will collapse this fact box pane over here so that we can see more information here. So right now, my batch is currently empty because I don't have any rows that are showing. And I want to, in this case, I'm going to ask the system to tell me what should be paid. And as I mentioned, I'm going to look at anything that's due up until April 30th. I'm going to get that payment ready to go. So the way I go and retrieve that information is by clicking on the Prepare button at the top and pressing Suggest Vendor Payments. And it has like a little Tech to Build acronym in brackets here because we augmented the native functionality a little bit. So this is the one we want. I think I hid the other button so you don't accidentally click it, but that's why it says tech to build, because we made some changes here. So we're going to say suggest vendor payments. And now the system is going to bring me this menu where it's asking me how I want the system to look for payments, and a bunch of different toggles that we're going to tell the system how we want it to search for payments and then kind of what we want it to do. So this is a way that we're telling the system how to search. And once you kind of configure this once, it sort of remembers your default settings so that you don't have to reconfigure this pop-up screen every time you run a payment. So it remembers the settings you typically like. And though every time you run a payment, it will ask you, it will present this screen to you, typically you won't need to change too much other than maybe some dates. As you like move forward through time, you're obviously looking for payments that are due on certain dates, but otherwise it'll kind of remember the toggles that you like, so you don't have to like reselect them each time, which is kind of handy. So the first option that we see in this list is the last payment date. So this is where we are telling the system what dates should it look for when preparing this payment batch. And what I've said was I'm going to look for anything that's due and hasn't yet been paid up to and including April 30th is what I said I wanted to do. So that's what I indicate here. The last payment date it should look for is anything that's due on or before that April 30th that hasn't yet been paid. If there are payment discounts applicable to those invoices or the vendor ledger entries, and if based on the discount date that has been already populated in the system, if the discount meets the criteria of being able to be applied, look for it. Otherwise, maybe, you know, we would typically probably be on, but in an example, maybe we're having a special payment run for invoices that we didn't get in on time previously for whatever reason. So, or we made a deal with the vendor that for some vendors that for this time, we're not going to take a discount for whatever reason, we could turn it off. But probably typically you'd want to leave it on. Vendor priority is not something I've used before, so we're not going to talk about it too much, but I think we can create different priority levels of vendors and configure it that way, but I'm not an expert on this, so we're not going to review this one yet. It hasn't really come up as being a requirement, but if it does need to be, then we will definitely learn and figure out how it works. You don't need to enter anything in this available amount. LCY means local currency. You don't need to prescribe anything to be entered in there unless your business process deems that you need to, but I haven't yet found a situation where we need to enter that, so we'll leave that. These are similar skip exported payments and check other journal batches, and we usually keep these as on, and what their meaning is, if we've exported anything already in another batch, or if Joe is working in his other batch, and he has data in there, let's check and make sure we're not doubly including any invoices that Joe's working on, but he hasn't yet like initiated his payment. Let's make sure that we're not including anything that he has in his batch or has already been exported. So typically those are on because we want to make sure we don't duplicate anything. Payment method code is where you will use this like grouping functionality to, if you want, to only pull the payments that you have indicated should be paid by check, or only pull the payments that you've indicated should be pulled by ACH, or only pull the payments that you've indicated are like credit card or manual ones, so that each unique payment journal batch can be kind of like a sensical grouping of transactions that you want to handle all at once. So this payment method code can sort of leverage that grouping and help you refine for exactly what you're looking for. In the testing of our example right now, I honestly can't remember what the payment method code of the vendors was that I've imported test data for. So for now, I'm going to leave it blank just to make sure we pull some data so I don't click the wrong one. But this is something that I could, you'll probably end up using. And we'll definitely make sure we, go through that testing in detail when we actually have your vendor data in the system to kind of illustrate how that works. Summarize per vendor is also typically on, and what this means is, in the case of check, we want to summarize all of the invoices for vendor A onto one check, rather than printing them 10 separate checks, one per invoice, which I imagine is probably a less likely scenario. The vendor probably usually wants one check with all of their invoices summarized on it. Similarly, if we were doing electronic funds transfers or ACH, just enter, send the vendor one big chunk payment, like only one payment line in their bank account, which is a summary of their 10 invoices that we have entered for them. So typically that's on. We're not going to use this dimension filter up here. I'm going to talk about it a little bit down here. So I'm going to leave this one blank. Posting date is the day that I want to post these transactions to the GL when I'm ready to post. So typically that's the same date that we're gathering the invoices on. But this is the one that's going to actually post to the GL. This is the one where we're finding invoices, and this is the one where it's going to post to the GL. Because our payment batch, the payment batch LoRa that I created, I had prescribed that I want to pay these invoices out of a bank account, and I had prescribed that I wanted it to be this bank account number. This information populates by default, and I'm happy with this, so I'm not going to change it. And for now, for simplicity, we're going to pay these payments on a check, just because I don't know if I have the ACH fully set up for this test company. So we're going to pay these invoices by check. If, again, we decide that the Bear Trustee and Limited Partner filter is one that you're going to use, and we want to make sure we only pay out the invoices for a certain limited partner out of this bank account, this is where we can do that filtering to make sure that that is the case. In this case, I'm going to remove it because I think that's the Bear Trustee I used on the invoices that I've posted, but I don't think I have an incredible amount of test data in the system across all Bear Trustees. So I think I'm going to just leave my filter open for now, just to make sure I pull things. So this is just, I know it took us a little bit to get through this screen, but as you generate more payments, it's most likely you won't need to change much other than the dates. And then if you're paying out of a different bank account, you would indicate so here, but probably most of your other toggles wouldn't change. So I'm going to press OK now. So this is me just telling the system how to search for the data. I'm going to press OK. It's going to go through all of the vendor ledger entries. It looks like maybe do have lots in there. I couldn't remember. So it looks like it did create lots and lots of stuff. So apparently I have lots of invoices in there, which is great. It created only one row per vendor because that's what I indicated should happen. It displayed all of the payments for each of these vendors and all of the amounts that are going to be paid for each of those vendors. And again, it just confirms for us it's paying them out of a bank account. This is the bank account number it's going to pay it out of. I'll make this column a little bit wider, but it's going to pay them by check in this case. So it's just kind of repeating all of that information for us here. Now, it may be the case that, like, I would imagine that there's some sort of approval process that needs to happen at this juncture where someone needs to kind of review this payment batch and make sure that, you know, all of these payments are approved to be processed for our April 30th pay run. And so there's a report in here. I just have to, I'm going to quickly, there it is. Okay, so it's found in actions and then posting, and it's called Vendor Prepayment Journal. And I'm going to click on it now, and I'm going to print it. It's not going to actually print it. It's just going to like display it to us on my screen as a PDF in a second, or maybe it's downloading it. There it is. So what it will do is it will show us all of the details of each payment. So in this case, it's saying, okay, you're paying this vendor number, which happens to be a number company, but like 138-1802 BC Limited, you're paying them $550. That $550 is made up of, in this case, only one invoice here. But if we go down to this next payment for 18 Mile Developments Limited, I know it's hard to see, but it's paying all of these in 6 invoices, which sum up to $32,000. But it'll show each invoice amount on its own. If there happen to be discounts, it would show what those discounts are. In this case, there's not, so those columns are blank, but it'll show both the Dynamics invoice number that was generated, the vendor invoice number that was generated. So this is sort of like a Dynamics report that's shown that will display kind of everything that's going to get posted. There is also a report in Buildbase that will give you a bit more information. So it'll show you all of the information I just showed you, but it'll also show you the names, depending on how invoices are going to get posted to Dynamics from Buildbase based on the configurations of your system. It'll show the names of the individuals that approved those invoices. So, which is kind of a handy feature because it will, probably for the most part, most of these invoices, it'll already show the people's names who have approved them in Buildbase, which gives the reviewer of this payment a level of confidence that a good chunk of these invoices have already been reviewed by someone on the team, which is great. And the only ones that won't have approval names listed beside them are the ones that like we entered directly into the Dynamics. So like my office signs one, because it didn't come from Buildbase. Buildbase won't have the name of the approver on it. So maybe those are the ones that this reviewer of this payment would narrow in or focus in on for the purpose of this payment review, because those are the ones that may have, you know, as we've talked about, maybe they will have been approved by someone based on the approvals that if we're going to have like an approval hierarchy for invoices in Dynamics alone that we sort of talked about earlier, and I made a note of. So we discussed that at some point, or we will discuss that at some point, but imagine we didn't, perhaps, and it was just done the way I did it and the way I demonstrated it to you, perhaps those would be the invoices that this payment reviewer would narrow in on and say, okay, these are the ones that haven't been seen by anyone else yet, other than the person that entered them, perhaps. Let's just focus in on these ones. So there's different reports that can be made available to you to kind of augment this process or support this process a little bit. As someone is going and reviewing this payment and approving it to move forward. For the I didn't realize I had so many invoices in here, and just in the essence of speed, I think I'm going to delete a bunch of them just so it doesn't take too long, because we had tons of vendors in there. But the system can absolutely handle it, but just for the purposes of our training today, we'll just do a few. So I deleted the ones that I don't want to pay right now. I imagine I printed my reports or saved my reports electronically, and I've sent them to whoever needs to review this payment, and they tell me that I'm okay to proceed with making this payment. What I would do is, and because we're making this through a computer check, what I would do is go to the check menu at the top here and press print check. And it'll tell me, okay, I'm going to print these checks out of this bank account. I'm going to tell or like pull from the bank account that the last check number this bank account issued was number 14, which means the next check number it's going to produce through the exercise we're completing now will be number 15. So it's just showing me that information. There's nothing else we need to select here, really. If we were reprinting a check because the printer ate our other check that we tried to print, we would select this because then it would use the same check number that it tried to use before. But in our case, we're printing these for the first time, so we don't need to do that. And they have a few other toggles here, but we're not going to select any of those right now. And we're going to say, yes, we're ready to print these checks now. So we're going to press the print button at the bottom, and it's going to bring us the check that it's going to print. I don't think we have the check numbers look weird, or the Micker font looks weird at the bottom here because I don't think we have the actual check font installed on this server. But normally this would look proper with the proper Micker font. But the format of these checks are stub checks. So it shows the invoice number that we're paying on each stub, the amount, the company name that we're paying it out of. This is just my demo company. The bank address, this is where this information lives. Gives us obviously the amount that we're paying. In this case, I had 2 signature lines configured on this check, which is why they both print. It shows us both the bank number and the check number here, because it is possible to have the same check number through different banks. So it also shows you what the bank number was that it paid out of. And obviously this is the vendor that we're paying. So it's not too exciting, just some regular checks. But these you'd obviously like print to your printer with your Micker ink and your check paper. And once you do that and they all print, not actually going to print them, but once you do that, it will show you that the checks have been printed here, and you can go ahead and post these entries to the GL by using the post print button at the top and pressing post. It'll say, do you want to post them? You say yes, and then it goes ahead and posts them. So imagine we distribute all these checks to our vendors, and then one vendor comes up to us or like gets in contact with us, and they said, I don't know, they like spilled coffee on their check and it's not able to be cashed. So we need to void their check. What we would go to is a screen called check ledger entries. So ledger entries are we looked at vendor ledger entries earlier. So those are all of the posted entries that are produced through accounts payable when we transact with vendors. There's lots of other types of ledger entries as well. So there's, in this case, what I'm looking for is check ledger entries. So this is the space where all of the entries for checks and ACHs would be posted. And in this case, as I mentioned, we needed to void one of our checks. So let's just imagine it's this one here. So what I would do is locate it, find the one that I'm looking for, and go to process and press void check. And what I will highlight is that 99.9% of the time, you probably want to unapply and void check, which will unapply the invoices from the check and void the actual check. If you press void check only and invoices had been applied to the original check, you'll end up in a situation where you can't reproduce that check because it won't it says, well, you didn't unapply the entries. You only undid the check. So a little bit of monkeying around is required in order to reproduce that scenario. The only scenario I could see where you would want to void check only is if you had created a payment line directly in the payment journals page. So for some reason, maybe we need to do something super quick and we didn't have time to enter an invoice and someone said, just pay vendor ABC $500. They need it right now. They're at the door and they need this money. We'll deal with the rest later. And you just created a payment journal, a manual line for $500 for vendor ABC. In that case, you could void the check only subsequently if you needed to, because nothing had been originally applied to it. But I would say that that scenario is fairly unlikely and least common. So in 99.9% of the cases, this is what you want to do in order to save yourself a little bit of a headache. And in this case, so I'm going to say unapply and void check. What it will do is it will bring forward the original date of that check as the date you want to void it. If for some reason it's been a couple of months since you've printed the check, and only now is the vendor coming to you and expressing this, accident has occurred and they need you to regenerate a check for them. And perhaps you've closed this accounting period already. Then again, similar to the discussion we had earlier, you have two options. You can change the date to be a more current date for an account period that is open, or you can go reopen your accounting period that's been closed if it's important to you that this void date is on the same date. So the system will tell you that if you're trying to post to a date for an accounting period that has been closed. In our example, that's not the case, but I just wanted to kind of highlight it does think you want to do it on the original date. If that original date has come and gone long ago and you've already closed that period, you may need to make an adjustment one way or the other, depending on whatever you choose. So I would say yes, unapply and void check. My entry status, which previously, I forgot to show you, previously it showed posted. Now the status is financially voided. So what that means is you can go regenerate that payment journal, and all of the invoices that were originally on this payment will come up as being due again, because they've now all been unapplied from this original check. So they're showing as due again and owing again. So they'll all come up again. You can regenerate that check and give it to your vendor. Or if it happened to be an electronic payment, you do it in the same way. The screen is still check ledger entries in that case. So this is the screen you go to in either case. You just have to kind of remember that if it's an electronic payment that you want to void, you still have to go to the check ledger entry screen. So that's just kind of a funny thing to remember. The way that the system operates is the same screen in either way. So that's how you void a payment. So that's kind of all of the main AP functionality I wanted to show today on a Dynamics level. We also have some, I understand you have a fairly strong reporting group at your organization, and you have a lot of custom reports. So obviously I can't show you any of those today because they're not in our system. But we have basic reports in here like aged accounts payable. So we can go look at that. I just can't remember how they here, aged accounts payable. I typed it wrong. And so we have that in the system. So you can go and configure how you want that aging to display. And you can send that to either PDF or Excel to be able to show you sort of what's outstanding and what's due for payment in the next 30, 60, 90 days. So if we wanted to send that to Excel, I think I can press just the Excel toggle and print that here. I had a lot more data entered in here than I expected. So it'll both print it for you or show it to you in PDF, but we know that often we might prefer an Excel view of something like this. So you can also download it to Excel by clicking the Excel toggle, which is what I selected. So it'll show you all your vendors, what their balance due is, what's current, and what's due in the next 30, 60, and over 60 days. So yeah, we have like the basic reports like this, but I do recognize that you have lots of great, meaningful custom reports that are built by your reporting team, and we will, make sure that you can connect into all of the raw data so that you can still have the ability to do that. But I just did want to, this is a typical one that most ERPs have, so I kind of wanted to show you this. But I know you'll probably be looking for lots more once you kind of get in there and trying to reproduce all of the robust reporting that you already have. I think that completes our agenda today for everything I sort of wanted to show on accounts payable. And again, this is sort of, a high level training to show you what is there and what functionality we have and kind of the basic process that you would follow to do certain things like enter vendors and enter invoices and enter credit memos. We went over how to do that manually and how to do bulk imports via Excel and how to generate some payments, but to kind of give you a high level overview of how the system works. But I think the intent is once we review more of your business processes and map out how everything's going to work and everything's going to flow, at that point we would have, more, detailed training sessions with your people who will be performing the activities based on kind of the business processes that we've both kind of reviewed, mapped out, signed off on to make sure that, we have a subsequent session to show people this is how it's going to work. This is what we're going to do. Both teams have kind of agreed that this makes the most sense and here's how you do these things. So the purpose of today was just sort of to introduce you to what accounts payable looks like in Dynamics with the knowledge that we'll probably need to do this again down the road once we have, a better grasp on how everything's going to look. And once we have your data in there too, because it's nice to see and go through these sessions with the people who are going to be performing these activities with your own data rather than, things that say demo home builder and stuff. So that will be our goal, is to get a lot of your data in there too, so that looking at the system becomes more meaningful to the people who are sitting on that next round of training sessions.
Great. All right. Great job. Thank you.
Awesome. So I have 2 takeaways from today that I will share, reshare with Stuart and share with Dan that we talked about, which was the expiry functionality regarding either and or insurance and WCB, and then talking about like how vendors are going to administer their own vendor accounts. Is there anything else that kind of came up for anyone today that you'd like me to note down to circle back on at some point as it relates to kind of your accounts payable processes?
I think we touched on it a little bit, but I just want to make sure we don't forget about the lien waiver process.
Yes. Dan was introducing that to me as well. So thanks for reminding me about that. I'll include that in my notes to the group because he expressed that is critical to success. So, and it obviously fits here. So thanks for reminding me about that.
Are you able to print checks or print the signature on a check also with this system?
Oh, that has never been asked of me before, and I don't know the answer to that. Is that something that you do today?
Yes.
Okay. Do you typically have 1 or 2 signatures that print on checks?
Just one, and admittedly, it's a very small portion of what we do today. We just started learning to do it for a remote location.
Okay.
So we admit it's not like we're doing it every day, but it is something that makes sense for us to be able to do.
Okay, well, thanks for asking that because I didn't know that and I don't yet have experience with how that works in the system, but this is the perfect time to raise that. So thanks for doing that. I'm going to add that as well to our kind of to-dos or to investigate action items. Anything else I should capture before we break?
Is there like a report screen, or do you always have to know what report you're looking for in order to search for it?
There's not really a report screen, but you can, the ones that are important to you, you can save as being like quick links on your, either on the accounts payable profile or on your own personal profile. So in that case, in order to get them there, you would kind of need to know what they were.
So there's not like a list of like canned reports that come with the system?
Not really because there are definitely canned reports, but in this profile, I don't have a list that are quick links.
I think
But
that
I
would be
can,
tremendously helpful.
like they have sorry, I'm going really fast. Like we have reports and analysis for accountants. So I think we can put something in here, like configure this reports and analysis section to like put some in here, but right.
Kind of like having
Now.
a library of all reports is really
Yeah.
helpful.
Totally. I'll note that too.
Great. Good question, Shelley.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for joining today. It was nice to meet you all. I know this was like, a good 3 hours of your time, so I really appreciate you spending the time with us, walking through and being introduced to the dynamic system today. I think we have a number of sessions next week where we'll get to meet some more on some different topics, but until then, I wish you a great rest of your week.
Great.
Thanks,
Thank you
you
very much,
too.
Laura.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, bye.
Bye.